Hi, my name is Corey Wiseman, and this is the first episode in a little series I'm putting together to document my journey to motherhood as a single mother by choice. In this episode, I will be talking with you about my decision to become a single mother by choice. The summer of 2019 was the first time since I was a child that I hadn't been a student or working. No grad school classes, no summer job, no teaching summer school, no tutoring. I wasn't even running my Airbnb because I had a long-term tenant that summer. And because my job as a kindergarten teacher is so completely consuming, that summer really was the first time in forever that I had ever paused to think about myself and what I wanted for my life. So I spent that summer with my family, my parents, my sisters, and their children, my nieces and nephews, up at our vacation spot in Lakeside, Ohio. And I started having these thoughts about how I wanted to have a family of my own. I was 37 and wasn't dating anyone at the time. I'd gone on over 200 dates since I was 30, and I had no interest in any of those men, so I doubted that I would meet someone I really like in the next couple of years before my fertility would decline. On July 23rd, 2019, I decided to consider becoming a single mother by choice. CBS correspondent Steve Hartman is a fellow Lakesider, and every summer he puts on a program at the local Hoover Auditorium. Steve showed a video that evening from his On the Road series about a high school student named Gerald Hodges who chose to join the swim team even though he didn't know how to swim. He was a good athlete though, and he learned how to swim, and in the end he was an essential part of the team. After sharing the video, Steve said, "I think every emotional growth spurt in my life happened because I stepped outside my comfort zone. The lesson I see there is, don't be afraid to do something hard." Well, upon hearing these words spoken that evening, my mind went straight to having a baby on my own, which is something that would definitely be outside of my comfort zone and most certainly would be incredibly hard to do. Well, I took that message home with me that night, and it kept me up most of the night and the following night as well. 2 days later, I told my sister Christy what I was thinking, that I might like to have a baby by myself, and she was very supportive. It would be over a month before I told anyone else in my family, as I needed some time to really think about this and do some research. I checked out a few books at the library, and the first one I read, Single Mothers by Choice, a guidebook for single women who are considering or have chosen motherhood by Jane Mattis, proved to be an invaluable resource for me. The author decided to pursue becoming a single mother by choice in 1979 at the age of 36 after realizing that she could get married at any age, and so postponed the search for a husband and chose to try conceiving a child on her own first. She founded the Single Mothers by Choice Incorporation in 1981. The terms single mother by choice, or choice mom, or solo mom in the UK, refer to a single woman who chooses to become a mother. They are mature, responsible, and feel empowered rather than victimized. So many marriages end in divorce anyway that many women become single mothers not by choice, and they deal with it. So it's not surprising then that a mature single woman would feel that if she decided to become a single mother, she could do at least as well, if not better than, someone who was unexpectedly left with a task after being abandoned by her partner or at the end of a bad marriage in an upsetting, life-disrupting divorce. Children of single mothers by choice, SMCs, are not children of broken homes. Our children have not experienced the trauma of a family being broken apart by divorce, nor have they endured the trauma of being part of a family with parents whose marriage is unstable or unhappy. Research supports that it is stability and lack of disruption, rather than the number of parents, that has a major impact on a child's adjustment. Teenage children of never married mothers are typically better adjusted than teens of divorced or step families, despite a double or higher income and having had more than one parent. Side note, I hope I'm not offending anyone watching this who might be divorced or in an unhappy marriage by saying that. These were just relevant considerations that I took into account when making my rather unconventional decision to enter parenthood on my own. Women who are single mothers by choice are among the growing segment of women with jobs, often high-paying professional ones, who have elected to bypass the first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the baby and the baby carriage progression. They have taken matters into their own hands and revised the fairy tale to fulfill a familiar dream in an unfamiliar way. Most single mothers by choice are middle to upper middle class, well-educated professional women, typically aged 35 or older. Some choice moms felt their commitment to a career was cheating them out of a personal life and opted to fill in the blanks by creating their own family. Some found that the combination of a demanding job and a shortage of strong candidates left them unwilling to settle for the compromise of a marriage for the sake of having children with a partner. These women refused to be driven to the altar by their desire for children. Reserving marriage only for love, they no longer reserve motherhood for marriage. Being a good parent is more important than being a married parent. Financial empowerment and a decrease in marriage rates are factors contributing to the rise of women becoming single mothers by choice in their 30s and 40s. If these trends continue, single motherhood could increasingly become one of the new ways people choose to form families. I feel so fortunate myself to live in a time when assisted reproductive technologies are available, which of course is another contributing factor to the rise in families led by choice moms. Generations ago, intrauterine insemination and in vitro fertilization, two commonly used procedures by SMCs, weren't options. So, what was on my mind as I worked through my decision to pursue choice motherhood? Well, first I realized that even if I met a man tomorrow, we'd likely date for a couple years, then be engaged for a year, then be married without kids for a year, and that's too long to wait. Kids now, man later. Maybe. Honestly, I'm pretty ambivalent about marriage. I've continually been disappointed and underwhelmed by the men I've met, and I can't imagine sharing my life and children with one. I've also been pretty observant of the unhappily married and divorced people in my life, and I've been so happy being independent and on my own for so much of my adult life that it's hard for me to imagine how marrying a man could actually make me happier than I already am and improve my quality of life. But who knows, that could change someday. It's just where I am right now. Historically, our culture has been very coupled, and people who are content to not be married are sometimes looked at as curiosities. Personally, I've never been happier in a relationship than I have been on my own. Most SMCs enjoy their own company and that of their children and other loved ones. They enjoy dating and socializing. There is an increasing number of women who would rather stay single than marry someone they don't love. For me, being a mother is more important than being a wife. That said, I do plan to continue dating, and many choice moms report that they find dating much more enjoyable after becoming mothers than it was before. Having already had a baby, they feel more relaxed about dating and less pressure to determine whether each man they meet is Mr. Right. Since they've already started their families, they don't feel the urgent need to marry, which allows them to take their time getting to know someone and to just have fun. There's also more freedom to be really selective without that time pressure. Not that an inability to be really selective was ever an issue for me. I will say that I've had a hard time dating men with children. Plus, some divorced men with children are only looking for companionship and they don't want more children. I wouldn't sacrifice having children of my own to be some guy's companion. But I think I'll be much more open to dating men with children, whether they would want to have more or not, after having my own child, because then we would just be a blended family. He has his children, I have mine. Maybe we'll have more together someday, maybe not. Another thing on my mind in working through my decision was the 1-to-1 ratio of one parent to one child, which seemed a little daunting. But I reminded myself that many families have a 2-to-2 ratio with 2 parents and 2 children, which is the mathematical equivalent to a 1-to-1 ratio. And still many other families have ratios of 2-to-3 or 2-to-4 or more when the parents are outnumbered by their children. I also reminded myself that as a kindergarten and first grade teacher, I'd been averaging a 1-to-25 ratio with 6-year-olds for 8 hours a day for the last 15 years. So upon further consideration, perhaps a 1-to-1 ratio might not seem so daunting to me after all. One negative aspect of single motherhood I thought about quite a bit was only having a single income versus a double income that 2 working parents could offer. But the truth is, most of the men I've met would not double my income, and many I've found would actually have been a financial burden to me. I'd rather spend my hard-earned money on my baby than on a man. Although, between you and me, I might still catch myself daydreaming of being a stay-at-home mom someday. Oh, and this was funny. As I was doing some research in one of the books I read, which was published in the 1990s, a choice mom shared, "If there's one thing I could change about single parenting, it's the financial burden. An extra $10,000 a year net. If I had someone who would sleep on the couch and bring in $10,000, it would be great." Another author wrote that some choice moms transformed their properties into a job itself, like a bed and breakfast, or brought in a roommate. I found this hilarious because I'm literally already doing that and have been for years by renting out my basement through Airbnb, a travel accommodation sharing platform that would not exist until about 20 years after that book was published. Anyway, it was reassuring to me to know that I'm already doing one of the things that many choice moms were considering to help ease the burden of parenting on a single income. A positive aspect I love about being a single mother by choice is that your children get to have your last name. That was important and super exciting to me. I'll talk more about this in a future episode, but this was a huge plus to me personally because I always wanted to keep my last name and I wanted my children to have my family's last name. Not hyphenated, just my last name, which is pretty much unheard of in families with married parents. And if you're into it, you could even have a junior. I thought about naming my child, a boy or a girl, Corey Wiseman Jr., and calling them CJ for Corey Jr. Just kidding. Doesn't that sound ridiculous and absurd coming from a woman? No, let's keep that reserved for narcissistic men. No offense. Studies have shown that in a baby's first year, single mothers by choice are more satisfied with their lives and with motherhood than their married counterparts. This equals out after the first year. Married women have to constantly decide between the needs of their baby and the needs of their spouses, where single women can just focus on their babies. Married women often become resentful of their spouses after doing so much more with regard to parenting and housework. Single women are used to doing everything, and that's the expectation, so there's no disappointment in a partner who's not carrying their weight. Theoretically, the workload required to raise kids alone should be twice as heavy when two parents are present, but in fact, the energy it takes to argue over who does what can be far more draining than the task itself. In some regards, parenting alone can be easier. Finally, I found myself thinking of a quote from a poster hung on a colleague's door at the school where I work. If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always gotten. I realized if I didn't try something different soon, I would remain everyone's favorite aunt. I can be a mom and still be the favorite aunt, right? Well, I knew that I would always regret never having tried to have children. Whereas if I took the plunge and tried to do it myself, however hard it would turn out to be, I couldn't imagine regretting becoming a mom. If you don't choose anything, eventually you're left with nothing. The last thing I want to talk with you about today is that as a single mother by choice, I've had to consider ahead of time how much information I want to share. Some people will ask SMCs for the most intimate details, things they would never ask a married woman, because the situation is a novelty to them, and they're eager to fill in as many missing pieces as possible. It's up to each woman to set the boundaries she's comfortable with regarding how much or how little she wants to share. I've decided to be an open book, clearly, and I'm happy to share my story with others in the hopes that it normalizes this option of an alternative family, as well as to bring awareness to girls and women that they don't have to get married to have a family. By the way, there are more alternative families than traditional nuclear families in the US, and there has been for decades. So the alternative family is actually more typical rather than less typical. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that while less common, the option of choosing to parent solo does also exist for men. For a man to become a single father by choice, he would need to find an egg donor, either known or unknown, as well as a surrogate to carry the baby. Typically, the donor and surrogate are two different women. The reason for this is because it's more likely for a woman who has carried and birthed a child who is biologically hers to change her mind and want to keep the baby after birth. When two different women are involved in the egg donation and the surrogacy, it's less likely that one of them would want to keep the baby, and more likely that baby will go home with the intended single father by choice in the end. Fun fact, Anderson Cooper did just this. So did his friend Andy Cohen. There are also many female celebrities who have chosen single motherhood, such as Mindy Kaling, January Jones, Sandra Bullock, Meg Ryan, and Diane Keaton. Who knew I was so Hollywood?